Hey, this is Glover Teixeira, UFC light heavyweight champion.
Hi, I'm Robbie Lawler.
What's up, fight family? This is your favorite MMA coach, Thiago Alves, the Pitbull.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Pedro Munoz.
This is Mike Brown.
Guys, I am Alexandr, and welcome.
And welcome.
And welcome.
And welcome.
And this is We Want Picks.
And you're watching We Want Picks.
To We Want Picks.
We Want Picks.
To We Want Picks.
To We Want Picks. Hi everybody from American Top Picks.
My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. I'm going to break down the entire UFC Vegas 53 fight card. I'm going to give you my picks, predictions, and my bets. And if you want 50 free bucks, we're giving away $50 to anybody who goes to WeWantPicks.com/bets, signs up, and makes a deposit. So go to WeWantPicks.com/bets, sign up with any one of our 5 betting partners, make a deposit, and we send you 50 bucks. Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, however you want it, 50 bucks, WeWantPicks.com/bets. And we're coming off the heels of UFC Vegas 52, which was pretty fun. A couple of weird fights, a couple of interesting twists and turns, but it was a good card overall. And let's jump into UFC Vegas 53. And this is brought to you by EarnU. EarnU is the world's first sports and esports prediction game, allowing you to earn crypto risk-free. Check it out now at EarnU.io. And opening up the UFC Vegas 53 fight card, we have Tatsuro Taira taking on Carlos Candelario. Tatsuro Taira is a big prospect that people have been talking about for a little while now. He's the #1 ranked flyweight in Japan, and like a lot of the fighters out of that region, he is incredibly young. He's only 22 years old, but he has 10 fights with 9 finishes. If you had to put him in a category, you'd probably call him a grappler, but he's also a very patient striker with legit power in his hands. A handful of submission wins were set up from strikes on his feet, and then his incredible speed and scramble skills just snatched up a submission on the ground. He does not have the best takedowns in the division, but he will stick with them and he will drag you to the ground. Carlos Candelario, he's a Northeast guy like myself, and he's been coming up for a little bit, a little while now. He's coming off a loss on the Contender Series, but it was an incredibly fun fight, and he was able to work a UFC contract out of that anyway. Style-wise, he's pretty good everywhere. He has very good hands with a Golden Gloves experience. He has solid BJJ with competition experience, and up until his split decision loss on the Contender Series, he was undefeated, but he did have a 4-year gap between fights because of some injuries and just life in general. And anytime we get one of these undefeated Asian prospects, people are always screaming about padded records, level of competition, but Taira seems to have done it correctly. Every fight, if you dig into his record, every fight was against an opponent with more skills and a better record than his previous opponent. So he worked his way up appropriately, and in the mix, there's a bunch of guys that he fought that with positive records that had 30, 40 fights under their belts. And it's an interesting fight because I think Taira is the more technical fighter, but Carlos is the tougher fighter, and I think he has more ways to win. I think if Taira can push a clean ground and pound game without getting sucked into a brawl, he can take the decision. But if he lets Carlos make it ugly, like Carlos did in both of his Contender Series fights, then I think we'll see Carlos squeak out a decision. So Carlos is the dog, and he is willing to go to war here, which is interesting, but he hasn't been the same since his 4-year layoff in 2017. I do think this is much closer than the 2-1 odds the lines have been set at, but I think Taira's the pick here. I think he does keep it at a technical pace, but Carlos Candelario is a live underdog for sure in this matchup. Then we got Gabe Green taking on Yohan Lainesse. Yohan Lainesse is a grappler who can KO you with anything from a check hook to an overhand. His striking is not very technical, but holy crap does he have power. He wings big, heavy punches from wide away while charging forward, and as soon as you get comfortable striking with him, he'll shoot a double leg, clean up the middle. Once he hits the ground, he works for control, and he just starts pounding away. Everything he does looks like it hurts, but he definitely is on the slower side, and he does have a tendency to brawl, so a technical striker can probably pick Yohan apart. Gabe Green is also a grappler, but he has solid striking skills and good pressure. He's very comfortable in his striking style where he works in kicks really well and he has a slick ground game where even if he's the one that gets taken down, he's always threatening with a submission, and that sets up his sweeps and it sets up his scrambles. And this should be a fun fight between two guys who are skilled but have a tendency to get caught up in a brawl. I think Yohan is far more powerful and is dangerous on his feet, where Gabe is the more dangerous grappler on the ground. Yohan will have the better takedowns, but Green will probably be faster. The odds makers have this split down the middle, and I agree with that. Ultimately, I think the scariest thing about this fight is how hittable Green is. Yohan throws big looping punches that can end the fight at any moment, but I am going to trust Green to throw straight punches right up the middle, get inside of that looping power of Yohan, and grind out what will probably be a nail-biting decision. So Gabe Green is the pick, but holy crap, is Yohan dangerous in this fight. Then we have the returning prospect, I guess we'll call him, Natan Levy, taking on Mike Breeden. And Mike Breeden's coming off a short notice loss in his UFC debut about 6 months ago. He's a good striker with solid range control and a lot of variety in his striking. He has some power in his hands, but not enough to steal a fight later in the rounds. He's more of a volume guy that's always throwing something. He has okay takedown defense, but he was able to defend 7 of 9 from Anthony Romero on the Contender Series, but his get-up game is very solid even when he does get taken down. Natan Levy's coming off a loss to Rafa Garcia in his UFC debut, which I made a ton of money on. I love that Rafa Garcia. I got 2 solid Rafa Garcia picks in a row. Anyway, Natan is a very good grappler who grapples with every opportunity he can get, meaning he wastes no time on his feet and he immediately starts looking for trip-style takedowns. If you throw kicks, he will catch them and he'll just run from there, work you to the ground from there. He's very good on the ground, but he almost gets too excited and he ends up in weird scrambles where he's just stuck defending a Kimura, then defending a guillotine and things like that. He's just too excited to chase the finish instead of just plotting and taking his time, using the control and working from there. And that really is just lack of experience, and that will come with time. Rafa Garcia was able to take him down 7 times, and he controlled him for almost 6 full minutes. And this is an interesting fight because we have the young, hot prospect in Natan Levy, and I think the UFC is definitely looking to get him back on track. If you watch any Natan Levy fights, they're pretty straightforward. He gets it to the ground, he works from there. In his wins, he has 3 finishes and 3 decisions. His finishes were pretty opportunistic, and he snatches things up in scrambles. His decisions were kind of sloppy, honestly, but I still think he is able to get it done against Mike Breeden. I think his relentless takedown attempts, whether he's catching kicks, pushing forward, working in those trips, I think those relentless attempts, Natan will get it to the ground. And even if he doesn't submit Mike Breeden, I think the judges are going to like the forward pressure and they are going to like the control. But Natan Levy, frankly, I don't think he is the incredible prospect that the UFC thinks he is. And we'll find out a lot here in this Mike Breeden fight. If he blows through Mike Breeden, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. And he is that hot prospect, and he just had a rough outing in his UFC debut. If he's a little bit sloppy and slows down, then, frankly, he only has 7 fights. It's probably a little too soon for him to be in the UFC. Then we've got Daniel Da Silva or Daniel Lacerda. He shows up as both, so when you're doing your own research, don't only go by what I say. When you're doing your own research, search him as Lacerda and Da Silva. It is the same person. And he's taking on Francisco Figueiredo. Daniel Da Silva, he's also known as Daniel Lacerda. He's a very good striker with solid kicks and forward pressure. If he gets it to the ground, he has really good control and pressure from top, but his takedowns aren't great, so that's not really guaranteed that he'll get it to the ground. All 11 of his wins and both of his losses are by stoppage, so he's very dangerous, but he is willing to put himself in harm's way to chase a stoppage. He is a legit threat both standing and on the ground. Francisco Figueiredo is the champ's younger brother, and he has a similar fighting style, but at 75%. So take Davison Figueiredo, take 25% off the top, and then you have Francisco Figueiredo. He's an aggressive striker with pressure and power who's slick on the ground. But I will say what I think he does better than his brother is wrestle and grapple. And not necessarily that he's a better wrestler or a better grappler. I just think he uses it more often and he uses it more effectively. And he's just more willing to push that wrestling pace. And it does show in his stats. He averages 3 takedowns per fight with a 75% accuracy and almost a 90% takedown defense. And this is another pick'em fight with a very slight edge to De Silva on the books. I actually see it the other way. I think it should be a slight edge for Figueiredo. I think people spend too much time focusing on the fact that he's not as good as his brother and less time focusing on the fact that he is actually good on his own. As his own fighter, regardless of his last name, he's pretty good and he's pretty good everywhere. And in this specific matchup, I do like Figueiredo to get the takedowns and grind out a win. That takes us to a couple of journeyman women. We have Gina Mazany taking on Shanna Young. Gina Mazany is working through her second stint in the UFC. She currently sits at 2-5 overall in the UFC. Style-wise, she's a strong grappler who averages almost 5 takedowns per fight, which is incredible. That's an incredible number. You do not see that too often. Her issue is, though, that she doesn't strike very well. She doesn't like getting hit. She clams up when you pressure her. She took down Priscilla Cachoeira 4 times in 2 rounds and still managed to get knocked out. Shanna Young is also on her second stint in the UFC. She's a solid boxer who isn't afraid to fight in the pocket and has some decent power. She's very tough and doesn't stop coming forward. She's a good wrestler in her own right, but she does have gaps in the BJJ department. And the odds have Gina as a slight favorite in this most likely win or go home match. And it's definitely because of the takedowns. Shanna has been taken down in all 3 of her UFC fights and has lost all 3 of them because of that pressure. I think Gina does get the takedowns and I think she does ride out a decision, but Shanna is tough. She's willing to bang, and we have seen Gina lose to strikes after dominating the grappling. So Mazany is the pick, but the bet that I will be placing is Shanna Young to win inside the distance, but decision, no action. If you don't know what that is, basically, if Shanna Young wins inside the distance, if she wins by TKO, which happens pretty often to Gina Mazany, then I will get paid. But if Shanna Young loses a decision because she's taken down and ridden out, I get a refund. That bet never happened. You're only going to get that bet and bets like that bet if you go to wewantpicks.com/bets. We have 5 partners. Bet Online is the one partner that offers that win inside the distance, decision, no action prop bet. So check that out. If you make a deposit, let me know, and we send you $50 as a thank you. And that takes us to Andre Fili taking on Joanderson Brito. Andre Fili is a very well-rounded guy, and he was supposed to be the next big thing coming out of Team Alpha Male, but he really never lived up to that hype. Part of that was the matchmaking, though. I do think they threw him in with some killers a little too early. Max Holloway was his second ever fight in the UFC, and then his losses after that were to Yair Rodriguez and Calvin Kattar. Style-wise, Andre's a very well-rounded technical brawler with wrestling. He does get hit often, which you can see with his negative striking differential, and he does rely on his chin, which for the most part has held up, but that can't last forever, and you cannot build your fighting style around hoping your chin doesn't give out. Joanderson Brito is a fast and athletic grappler with solid top pressure and a wide array of submissions. He's coming off a close loss to Bill Algeo, where he had 2 takedowns, which was after a dominant win on the Contender Series where he had 3 takedowns. His striking isn't very technical, but he will come forward and throw bombs. Big, wide punches and heavy kicks with almost no regard for what comes back his way. But even though he is comfortable striking, he will most likely look to get this to the ground and work from there. This can be a fun fight. Both Fili and Brito have no problems getting into a war, and both guys are very well-rounded. Each have solid striking with a technical advantage to Fili and solid grappling with the advantage to Brito. I think this fight can end up looking a lot like the Algeo-Brito fight, where Algeo was able to get the better of the striking exchanges and hang in the grappling department. If Fili works in his takedowns like he did when he had 5 against Charles Jourdain, he should be able to avoid the submissions and grind out a win. So Andre Fili's the pick. I need him to lean on his wrestling here, which hopefully he does, and then he should be able to grind out a win. Then we got Jared Gordon taking on Grant Dawson. Jared Gordon's a good wrestler with solid pressure and striking. He bounces between featherweight, lightweight, and catchweights in between those two. And you can see the size difference in some of those matchups. He's coming off a nice win over Joe Selecki, where a lot of people expected him to get out grappled. And honestly, he was. He was taken down 4 times and gave up 6 minutes of control time. He had the majority of his success striking, and he does have a solid striking differential of 5-3. Grant Dawson has also bounced between weight classes, but he does seem to be permanently set up at 155 because he had weight issues at 145. He looked good in his last fight, which was a draw again, but Grant won that fight. He had almost 9 minutes of control time and a much higher striking percentage. Before that, he won with literally 1 second left with just savage top game where he unloaded. And that just showcased his heart more than anything. Dawson has a great ground game with absolutely relentless pressure. He has good technical striking, but his clear advantage in almost all of his fights is his wrestling and his grappling. And I like Jared Gordon a lot, and I think he impressed a lot of people in his last fight, but Grant averages almost 4 takedowns per fight, and Jared Gordon has been taken down in 4 of his last 6 fights, including 4 times by Joe Selecki. So I like Grant Dawson to get the takedowns and rack up control time in what will probably be a boring but high scoring in DraftKings fight. So Grant Dawson is the pick. Another guy, I need him to stick to the wrestling, and then we should be good if he does. And that takes us to Gerald Meerschaert taking on Krzysztof Jotko. We got classic striker versus grappler matchup here. Gerald Meerschaert is a very good grappler who is always live for a submission. He's not great on his feet, and people question his chin, but I think he proved a lot of people wrong in his last couple of fights. His biggest issue is he has built a career on just getting pummeled and then pulling off a submission upset win. And he's an incredibly talented grappler, but he doesn't have very good offensive wrestling, even though he averages a little over 2 takedowns per fight with a 41% takedown accuracy. You can't always count on Gerald to take people down to get it to the ground. Krzysztof Jotko has fantastic speed and is very athletic. He has good takedown defense and very high volume output. He typically looks to dance around the outside and rough up his opponents. He likes to touch and move, stick on that outside, lose the range, use the speed. Misha Serkinov took him down 5 times in his last fight, but he ended up stealing the decision because of the striking on the feet. Jotko has solid takedown defense at 83%, and even if he is taken down, he has good enough submission defense to survive. Gerald Meerschaert has one single path to victory here, and that is by submission. But again, the issue for Meerschaert is his offensive wrestling. He doesn't have clean takedowns to force the fight to the ground. But what's insane is people like Dustin Stoltzfus, Bartosz Fabinski, they all had very clear advantages on the feet, but they decided to grapple. And obviously they were then submitted by Meerschaert, and that was just poor game planning. Jotko is not that guy. While he can grapple, and he does have takedowns in 10 of his UFC fights, I think the grappling gap will be so wide that he won't even entertain it. He's just going to do what he does well, stick and move. He's going to light up Gerald Meerschaert's face. I like Krzysztof Jotko to get it done because I think he is smarter than Gerald Meerschaert's last couple of opponents, and he's not going to take them down. So again, Gerald Meerschaert riding a nice 3-fight submission streak, but his last 2 wins, which he won by submission, he didn't take it to the ground. His opponents took him to the ground. Terrible game planning by those guys. Krzysztof Jotko is not going to make that mistake. Then we have the rebooked Alexandr Romanov taking on Chase Sherman. Chase Sherman stepped up on short notice this past week at UFC Vegas 52, but then a few hours before his fight, maybe even less, maybe it was like an hour before his fight, they announced Chase Sherman is out. He withdrew because of illness. And this fight has been moved to next week, which is this card that I'm breaking down now. So I don't know why. If you know what happened, let us know in the comments. All they said was illness. I could just assume Chase was thrown up in the back or something like that. Obviously, it's not COVID. It's not an injury because they're not just going to push it 7 days if that were the case. But anyway, we now have Alexandr Romanov versus Chase Sherman at UFC Vegas 53. And Chase Sherman, he's a good boxer with solid foot movement and speed. He doesn't have a ton of power, but he has volume, and he doesn't stop throwing hands until the last bell, even if he is extremely tired and slowing down. Chase has solid takedown defense at 77%, but he does not have the heavy movement, though, which is why he is hit with more than 6 significant strikes per minute. Alexandr Romanov is a fantastic high caliber wrestler. He's a massive human being with incredible speed and power that he uses to take you down and pound on you. He just comes in, bombs, shoots through you like a freight train. He's coming off a very dominant win over Jared Vanderaa, but his fight before that was a controversial decision over fellow wrestler Juan Espino, where some of Romanov's holes were exposed. Listen, I mentioned this is a rebooked fight, so let's talk about what we learned from the initial booking just a few days ago. Alexandr Romanov on the scale looked amazing. He looked amazing. This picture that I have here, this is the UFC's official picture. Go look at the weigh-in picture. He has abs. He looks great. He looks like he's in phenomenal shape. The other thing we know is he was a minus 2,500 favorite, literally the biggest, widest betting gap in the history of the UFC, Alexandr Romanov versus Chase Sherman. I am curious what that happens this week, but Alexandr Romanov is going to win this fight. He's going to steamroll Chase Sherman. He's going to take him down, beat him up. That's what he's going to do. And the reason he's going to be able to do that is because Chase Sherman, while he's a pretty good striker, while he's so incredibly tough, he does not have the one-punch knockout power. He cannot just crack Alexandr Romanov on the way in and get it done. Yes, they're heavyweights. Yes, it's a fist fight, but Chase Sherman does not have that scary one-punch power knockout that will worry us. He doesn't have the grappling that could maybe take Alexandr down like Juan Espino did. So Alexandr Romanov should steamroll Chase Sherman. The odds are crazy. I don't know what they're going to be going into this weekend. They may be worse or better. I don't know, but I do have him as a parlay piece with a couple of other people to make something happen. So Alexandr Romanov is absolutely 100% going to be the win here. And if you can get him at odds that are not minus 2,500, throw him in a parlay because he's as close to a guarantee as you're going to get, especially on a card like this. Then we got Darren Elkins taking on Tristan Connolly. Darren Elkins is incredibly tough and absolutely never out of a fight. He's always live for a finish and is the definition of a grinder. He comes forward with heavy strikes to close the distance. He cuts off the cage and he works in his grappling. He's a pretty good wrestler with incredible top pressure. He can pound you out with a TKO or work his submission. And he's coming off a KO loss to Cub Swanson where he was not able to get the takedown and he suffered the consequences. Essentially, Darren Elkins is scrappy, he makes fights ugly, and he thrives in those spots. If he struggles to take you down, he will struggle when his opponents are able to keep fights clean and technical. So Darren Elkins needs to make this and any other fight he's in as dirty as possible to win. Tristan Connolly was brought in to lose to Michel Pereira almost 3 years ago at welterweight, which is 25 pounds heavier than what he will be fighting at in this fight. But Pereira blew his wad during that fight, doing all his capoeira dance moves, and Tristan just took over from there and took the win. So while the win is impressive on paper, you just need to know when you're doing your research here that Tristan didn't win that fight. Michel Pereira lost that fight. And style-wise, Tristan is a high-pressure guy who walks forward, throwing punches, and even when he gets hit, he does not stop coming forward. He's tough, he has power in his hands, and solid grappling. And it's an interesting fight because Darren Elkins averages about 3 takedowns per fight, and he can make this look a lot like the Pat Sabatini versus Tristan Connolly fight where he just racks up control time and takes a pretty dominant win. But Darren can get wild at times, and he is willing to trade. Tristan is stupid tough, and I think he can steal this one. I think Tristan can avoid the takedowns, land those big punches, and sneak out a win. I fully recognize how tough, how crazy, and how dangerous Elkins is, but I think the damage, no pun intended, is starting to catch up to him. That Cub Swanson win was a loss, I guess, was not a good look. And Darren's just starting to show the wear and tear that happens to you when you fight the way he fights. These guys are pretty much the same age, but I would argue that their bodies have very different miles on them. So I do like Tristan Connolly to get it done, but the reality is Darren Elkins is a guy that you can never count out of a fight. But the pick is Tristan Connolly. And that takes us to the co-main event of the evening. We have Andrei Arlovski still doing it, taking on Jake Collier. Jake Collier was a big physically fit middleweight. Then he was an okay size light heavyweight, and now he's an undersized and exhausted heavyweight. He has ballooned up. He literally was a 185-pounder. When you break down tape of him, you're going to have to do a double take and make sure you're looking at the same guy. That is him. He was a pretty talented middleweight, and he's just sort of ballooned up to heavyweight. And technique-wise, he's a well-rounded guy who shocked everyone in his last fight with a submission win over Chase Sherman, because typically at heavyweight, Collier is a volume striker with forward pressure, not a ton of power, but he was a striker and you didn't have to worry about the grappling. And then he took Chase Sherman down, submitted him, and a lot of people were surprised by that game plan. And I imagine everyone at this point knows who Andrei Arlovski is, but in case you don't, he's a straight-up legend. He's a former champion, future Hall of Famer, and one of the more accomplished heavyweights to fight in the UFC, literally ever. He has very good boxing, pretty good kicks, and as of late has been a decision machine. He has been fighting for over 20 years and not only brings all of that knowledge into every single fight, but he manages to make small improvements as well. Obviously, being 43 years old, the big question is, will his chin hold up? And honestly, that's tough to answer. I don't know. And I don't think it matters because Jake Collier does not have that one-punch knockout power. I feel like this is a carbon copy of 5 of Arlovski's last 6 fights. He's basically just a kickboxing match against lesser opponents. I like Andrei Arlovski to get his 4th decision win in a row with just superior technique and conditioning. Even if Jake wants to work in some grappling like he did in his last fight, that's not going to be an issue for Arlovski. Arlovski has a 78% takedown defense over, you ready? 43 fights in the UFC. 43 fights in the UFC, he has a 78% takedown defense. That's an astronomical number, and that's an astronomical amount of fights, and he has fought the best to do it in 3 generations. Jake Collier, I just don't see him getting it done. I like Andrei's veteran savvy, his solid striking, his chin seems to be okay, his cardio seems to be okay, his footwork seems to be okay. I like Andrei Arlovski to just literally cruise to another striking decision win. And then we have the main event of the evening. We've got Rob Font taking on Marlon Chito Vera. Rob Font is a Northeast guy. Like myself, I just got something special in my heart for these Northeast guys, but he's gritty, tough, and technical. Rob has solid power and a solid chin. He's got great boxing and a great get-up game. He's primarily a boxer, so he doesn't kick very often, but he doesn't need to because his hands are so clean, so fast, and he just works in and out of that pocket before most fighters even know what happened. If we look at his stats, he has fantastic volume and a striking differential of 3-2. He's coming off that loss to Jose Aldo, but Font won the statistics. If you didn't watch the fight and you only looked at the stats, you would have thought Rob Font won. He landed 193 strikes to Jose Aldo's 96. He had 1 takedown to Jose's 0 takedowns, but he did give up 9 full minutes of control time, and that's frankly what made the difference. And it was just Jose Aldo's veteran savvy to win those small exchanges and rack up some of that control time that made the difference here. Marlon Vera is a Muay Thai striker who likes to fight ugly. He uses all 8 of his limbs, meaning his elbows, knees, hands, and feet, for a pretty versatile attack style. To round out his dangerous striking, he also brings a submission threat to the cage with an iron jaw. He's got a ton of stoppage power, a ton of finishes. He does have a negative striking differential, and he can be hittable, but he does a really good job of mixing in takedowns to avoid too much damage. He took down both Davy Grant and Song Yadong twice. So Song Yadong, the powerhouse, took him down. No real issues there. And this is a great fight night main event. I'm looking forward to it. Both guys are primarily strikers that do have grappling in their back pocket. I like Font. I just think he has the cleaner striking. He's specifically the better boxer, but Vera has a knack for making people fight an in-your-face and less technical style. He just has the ability to make you lose your technique and get sucked into a brawl. And if he can pull Font out of his range and keep him in the pocket, he can definitely have some success. But I do think Font is too composed and too well-rounded to get caught up in a firefight. I like Rob Font to mirror some of the success he had against Jose Aldo with his accuracy and his volume. But this time, I think he's going to get the win. Chito Vera has an incredible chin and a ton of power, so Rob will need to stay on point for 25 minutes. I like Rob to get the win. I love the minus 150 odds, so I am going to have a money line bet on Rob Font. Guys, that's the breakdown. Let me know in the comments below what your picks are. Let me know what you think of my picks. Like, subscribe, do all those things. And don't forget, wewantpicks.com/bets. Sign up with any one of our 5 betting partners, and we will send you $50 as a thank you. And don't forget to join our Tuesday night live streams. It's me and Jacob, so you're getting 2 perspectives. We're breaking down the fights. We're doing it live. We're giving you our picks, our bets, and our fantasy plays Tuesday nights, 8:30 p.m. Central. I'll see you there.